trading outpost at Sector 84 was a monument to boredom, a rotating hunk of scrap metal, where the silence was only interrupted by the hum of the atmospheric recyclers and the occasional hiss of a docking clamp. I spent my rotations watching the iridescent scales of my lower body shift through various shades of stagnant blue, waiting for a reason to feel the aggressive crimson of a true conflict. Then came the botanist, a Terran apparently, though it was hard to tell under the layers of stained fabric and the absurdly fragile-looking corrective lenses perched on its flat nose. It was holding a pair of glasses with one lens missing and the other a spider web of fractures, yet it treated the object as if it were a holy relic of the Coil Senate. I'll be honest with you. What I saw that day changed everything I thought I knew about the biological limits of survival. You'll want to hear how this ends, because the silence that followed that human's first breath in our custody is a debt the Senate is still paying. The botanist had been found poking around the mineral-rich moss of the forbidden exclusion zone, which was a violation of Treaty 4B, though it seemed more interested in the moss's reproductive spores than our defensive grid. When the border guards brought it before me, it didn't beg or offer the usual frantic excuses of the carbon-based. Instead, it reached into its pocket and pulled out a small, rectangular device that emitted a single rhythmic pulse. The light on the console flickered once, a pale amber that matched nothing in our database. I dismissed it as a localized distress beacon, a pathetic cry for help in a sector that didn't even have a functional relay within 3 light years. I made a mistake. Actually, I made several mistakes. The first being that I assumed the human's lack of armor was a sign of its species' primitive nature rather than a terrifying confidence in their own inevitability. The assault was, by all tactical definitions, a masterclass in overkill. I authorized the guards to secure the human's belongings, which mostly involved a rough shove and the deliberate crushing of those ridiculous one-lensed glasses under a guard's tail coil. The human watched the shards of glass scatter across the deck plating. It didn't scream. It didn't even hiss. It just looked at the empty space on the floor where its eyes had been protected, and for a moment, the amber light on its device turned a deep, bruised violet. I laughed, and for a second, my scales flared a brilliant, mocking gold. In the defense of my crew, we all thought the human was simply broken. We didn't realize that by destroying that small, meaningless object, we had just invited the end of our world into the room. The station's internal sensors began to chime not with the sharp alarm of a breach, but with a low, rhythmic vibration that felt like the station itself was starting to hum a tune I didn't recognize. The botanist looked up at me. Its eyes narrowed behind the absence of its lenses, and it didn't look like a scientist anymore. I remember noticing a small, dark smudge of grease on the human's left cuff. It was a completely irrelevant detail, yet my mind latched onto it as the lights in the command center began to dim one by one, as if the station were holding its breath. The station's cooling fans began to labor, a low-frequency groan that I hadn't noticed until the silence of the rest of the systems made it deafening. Then the hum started, that sub-audible vibration that felt like teeth rattling inside a skull. I ordered a full diagnostic, my own scales shifting into a muddy, agitated brown that I'm sure looked unprofessional to the junior officers. The tech officer didn't respond with a report. Instead, his coils were wound so tight, he looked like a spring about to snap. He whispered that the sensors weren't picking up ships because they weren't looking for hulls. They were looking for the ghosts of particles. I realized then that the botanist's little device wasn't a distress call. It was a lighthouse. You see, the humans had mastered a form of neutrino detection that turned our own technology against us. Neutrinos pass through everything, lead, stone, miles of reinforced hull. Plating it simply doesn't matter. You cannot hide a nuclear reactor from a species that knows how to listen to the radiation of the universe's most elusive ghosts. My mate had messaged me earlier about our hatchling shedding ceremony, and I found myself wondering if I'd ever be alive to send the credits for the feast, or if my legacy would end in this rusting bucket of a station. The airlock didn't blow. It simply ceased to exist as a functional barrier. One moment there was a pressurized seal, and the next, 5 armored giants were standing in a mist of flash-frozen oxygen. They didn't fire. They didn't need to. Our guards raised their pulse rifles, their hands shaking with a rhythm that matched the station's death hum. A human commander stepped forward, his suit a matte black that seemed to suck the very light out of the command deck. He looked at the rifles, then at me, and his visor remained a cold, expressionless void. "Your weapons are adorable," he said. The voice filtered through a Vox grill that made him sound like a grinding tectonic plate. "Do they do anything?" I tried to speak, but my mandible was locked in a stress cramp. He stepped past the guards as if they were nothing more than decorative furniture and knelt by the botanist, who was still staring at the floor where his glasses had been crushed. The commander pulled a bag of colorful spheres from a thigh pouch and offered one to the scientist. "We brought snacks," he muttered, the sudden shift in tone almost more terrifying than the armor. "This won't take long." The mystery of their speed was finally laid bare. They hadn't traveled to find us after the ping. They had been sitting in the dark, silent and cold, waiting for us to prove we were exactly as violent as their history books claimed. I watched the commander reach down and pick up the twisted remains of the glasses. My scales had locked into a dead, ash gray, my body coiling into a defensive spiral that felt less like a tactical choice and more like a physical confession of total defeat. I took the frames from him with a limb that wouldn't stop vibrating. The human didn't strike me, nor did he look at me with the hatred I expected. He just waited. I stood there, a lord of the border, holding a piece of broken plastic in one shattered lens, staring at the shadow of a massive human boot that seemed to stretch across the entire sector.